the apocalyptic end of the world and the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven in power, that end never came as promised. It gets slowly scrubbed out of the New Testament as time goes on. By the time you get to the Gospel of John, let's take a look here in John 18 today, and then I'll go on to some other references. This is from the Bible Gateway. This is a great resource to look up different verses and whole passages and chapters. So we're looking here in the Bible Gateway, John 18, and this is we will see that this is very different from the Synoptic Gospels, particularly Mark and Matthew. Pilate is asking him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus answers quite evasively. He says, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world, and if my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate said to him, "So you are a king, right?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king." So, I mean, you get these so evasive answers here. He doesn't, it's like Jesus doesn't want to admit or say that he is king of the Jews. I think that they knew in the later Gospels that this was so problematic because you could get killed for claiming, or other people claiming, that you're the king of the Jews. So the other thing to notice in here too is, if my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting. That is a clue to something historically, that the king of the Jews with his followers would be fighting to overthrow the foreign occupiers. That's what was expected from the Jewish perspective, from the Hebrew Bible perspective. That's what a Messiah was. And this might give us a little clue that that's actually what it was. But he's saying this in the reverse, that it's not, my kingdom is not of this earth. So we'll go on to some other references here. Continuing on. So we take a look at the Gospel of Mark in comparison. When he was asked, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" Jesus answered and said in Mark 14, he said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." Wow, that is different from the Gospel of John, where he just gives evasive answers and says, "My kingdom is not of this world." Let's take a look at what it says in Matthew. But Jesus remained silent. This is Matthew 26. And the chief priest said to him, "I adjure you, by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so, but I will tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Wow. Mark and Matthew, the earliest Gospels, say, hey, the end is coming, going to come on the clouds of heaven. Well, he's saying the Son of Man is going to be coming on the clouds of heaven. The Gospel writers in Christianity transferred that to Jesus as being the Son of Man who would come after he, was resurrected and ascended. But prior to that, what are they drawing upon in the Hebrew Bible? They're drawing upon imagery from the book of Daniel about the Son of Man coming on the clouds. Let's take a look at what it says in Daniel, the source that they are drawing some of these ideas from. In Daniel 7, it says, "I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, and glory, and kingdom, and all the peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. And his dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever and ever. Okay, so there's not much detail given. It's just saying that this Son of Man is going to come on the clouds. And it's really interesting because when this apocalyptic end comes, Daniel, written in about the 2nd century BC, where it's in the apocalyptic times that will lead up into the New Testament, they believed a one like a Son of Man would come in power on the clouds. But interestingly enough, in verse 18, it will be the saints who will receive this kingdom forever and ever on earth. That's the Jewish perspective. That's the Hebrew Bible perspective, even though Daniel is apocalyptic. So the gospel writers took imagery from that, and they even went further with it. They said it's going to happen within this generation. Let's look at what it says in Mark. This is Mark 13, the earliest gospel. But in those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And then he will send out his angels to gather his elect from the four winds and from the ends of the earth. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all of these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. That sounds powerful. All these things will come to pass within this generation. But those things did not come to pass within that generation. They expected it to happen in the 1st century CE. The disciples of Jesus were slowly dying off in the 60s AD. But it didn't come to pass, and it hasn't come to pass yet, even a couple thousand years later. Let's look at what Matthew says. Matthew mirrors, but even adds to it. Let's see what Matthew says. He sat on the Mount of Olives, and the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Matthew specifies the end of the age, apocalyptically. Okay, so he talks to them, and then let's skip down to verse 15. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. So back in Daniel, it's talking about the abomination of desolation. This was set up by a foreign king, oppressor, in the holy place. And Daniel thought, it's going to be the end during his time, but it did not happen in the 2nd century BC during the writer of the book of Daniel. Not the historical Daniel, but the writer of the book of Daniel. So Matthew even references and says, the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, which the end didn't come during Daniel's time, but the author of Matthew is thinking it will come during his time, within his generation. And that new abomination of desolation in Matthew's time be under the Roman power. something bad in the temple, an abomination. Okay, let's continue on in Matthew. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Powerful stuff here, similar to what it said in the Gospel of Mark. Then will appear in the heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and he will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And again, like in Mark, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So he is crystal clear here that all these things will happen within this generation. This generation will not pass away until all of these things happen. And there are other references that say, some standing here will not taste death until all these things come to pass. The Son of Man coming on the clouds with great power and great glory. Everyone will see this. The sun will be dark and the moon will not give its light. The stars are falling from heaven. Obviously, the apocalyptic end of the world did not come within the lifetime of those, the author of Matthew and the author of Mark, and Jesus and his disciples. The end did not come during that time. There are other ways to try and explain it away and say that, oh, well, it wasn't actually a physical kingdom. It wasn't actually like that. It was, a spiritual kingdom. And that becomes a Christian interpretation, but we can see pretty clearly here from the Hebrew Bible perspective, from the Jewish perspective. Remember, Jesus and his disciples were Jews. They were Second Temple, apocalyptic Jews. They expected this to happen, and it did not happen within their lifetimes. And with that, we will wrap up for today.